Okay, so hi. My name is James, and what I'm going to do today is go over some of the basics of how to take advantage and use a very affordable Western Digital MyCloud MyBook, and to use pretty much all the features that it has to offer in general that are advertised, um, just about. And I'll talk about some of the other programs that they have that I haven't tried to set up yet, but quite possibly could work very well. But I'm going to do the most useful things. I'm going to show you how to very easily be able to incorporate and use the Western Digital inside a Linux desktop environment. And call me old school, but I'm still using KDE3, and I like it that way. And I'm going to talk about a few issues that came up that have been around for a while with KDE. I'm going to talk about mounting Samba shares. I'm going to talk about how I got it to work without having to supply a password every time. Because at the end of the day, I want to have just a convenient desktop to use under the circumstances that I find myself in. So, first I'll start out with what features, what do I have here, and how easy is it for me to access these things, and etc. So I'll start off with what my results are. So this right here is it's a 4 terabyte Western Digital MyCloud. I got it about a week ago. And back over here, a little black thing with the flashing green light is a 2 terabyte Western Digital MyBook, which was, I think, the earlier branding of this product. Now, basically, what it is, it's a hard disk with a network port connected to it. So you can connect a network cable. It's not wireless, at least not at this stage. And you can, once you connect it to your local area network, DHCP will typically assign it an IP number. It's got a web interface that you can administrate it. You can statically assign an IP number. And then armed with the IP number, you can basically mount the drive to a location inside your Linux desktop. And then you can actually automate this mounting procedure, so you don't have to log in as root every single time, or make any changes to file system tab and roll the dice and see how things go. And then I'll talk about some things that can go wrong if you and those things that can go wrong shaped the end result of what I decided to do. So again, and also just another little disclaimer, I guess. At the end of the day, I'm doing this because this works for me. This is the most convenient way for me. There's more secure ways to do this. There's more disciplined ways. You can secure it all the way to your typing your password day in, day out, hour after hour, or you can just roll with it. And for my purposes, this seems to be good enough. All right, so let's start out with what my end result is. Let's look at desktops. This is KDE3, and I got a number of Windows apps installed and things like that. But I even have a little computer icon. Okay, I don't need this. I mean, I've used Linux for a while, but what I'm trying to do is make something that most people will just be able to use right off, not have to figure out how to do stuff. All right, so here is basically the contents of the computer folder. This is KD3, this is Conqueror from that time period. This icon here is for the my book, 2 terabyte over there. This icon over here is for that yellow thing. Okay, so are we ready? There's contents of the drive. Now, if you're wondering whether that's actually the contents of the drive, of course I have Windows 8 running a VirtualBox, and maybe I'll talk about that too, why I made that choice. There are the contents. 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 There's a WP 2000. That's case for working papers. Okay. Same thing. It does the same thing. I'll just go into this thing over here. This is the MyCloud. Okay. There's the contents. All right. Windows. MyCloud. And MyCloud. Okay. So I was able to do that, but how hard was that for me to accomplish? Next thing I want to show you, and I'll get into that. And then how did I do it? Okay, so the next thing, and here's the first clue is I didn't use initd. The next thing that I have, that's for people that are more experienced. The next thing I want to show is the Western Digital MyCloud software in practice. So there is the MyCloud over there. Sit back while we connect your device. I'm not quite sure if I don't remember setting up a password. That's the only thing. I don't remember setting up a password for this device here. So okay, so I just clicked OK a couple times. Said James, didn't really matter. Here I am. So this is the Western Digital MyCloud, and I'll just pull away from there. There's the contents. Same deal for I can pick the other device maybe, right? This keeps wanting to have. Oh, yeah, this one has a password. There we go. Okay, so basically I have access to this. Now, why is this important? I mean, I'm in the same office. Obviously, I can mount the shares here, and what's the big deal? So, well, if I'm away, let me explain how this works. Western Digital, primarily before they got into this line of business, is a really good product, by the way. Before they got into this line of business, they just made hard disks, pretty much. I can't say that's Bible truth, but that's my impression in general. They ended up buying some company that's from around where I work here in Palo Alto. And basically what that company did is they worked on some technology that if that company's servers are running, it will basically what happens is the MyCloud every once in a while will send call it a ping up to the servers that this now Western Digital owns, and they keep track of this my disk here. And then when I install the MyCloud, I also phone home, right? And because I'm in the same local area network, it scans the network, it finds it, and then once I add it to my repertoire here, I can access it. Well, I could also go to I could also connect with this program to the Western Digital servers. And once I've registered my device with Western Digital, It's got a unique identifier. Okay, and of course you can access these. There's a web-based interface. In fact, I'll just show that right now. Once you activate it, the folks at the Western Digital Company, they know that you know there's an association between you, your email address, and the unique identifier for this device, and a login name at the Western Digital website. So basically, I can pretty much go anywhere, and if I could run this program from wherever I'm at, it'll connect me to this device. They'll tunnel me in. The device will ping back. It's ready to receive a strong connection. So the other day when I was remoting into my mom's computer and I needed to get some software that was on this thing, my mom's down, she's 400 miles away. I was able to download what I needed to get to her that was on this thing onto her computer and use it. And that's a really good convenience. Because yes, when I SSH into my mom's computer, and at that point I do have a way to have a graphical login, but I can't FTP things over to her. So this made it very useful, and things worked out well. And so it was so now how did I get this to work in the first place? The web interface will work anyway. Pretty much if you have a router that's running DHCP to start with, it will assign an IP number to this device. If you don't have DHCP to start with, then you're kind of stuck trying to figure out what the IP number is. You can get a clue as to how you might do that if you ran Wireshark and things of that nature, and you would pick up it sending out these little bleeps from its local IP address, and you could eventually figure out what it is. It'll say in the packet sniffs, it'll say Western Digital. Let me see if I could do a quick packet sniff, just for, because that is one difference. That's one feature. If you use Linux, you're not going to have that you have in Windows. In Windows, if I double click on network, by magic, there it is. And if I double click on my cloud, all of a sudden there's my web-based interface that I was just at over there in Linux. In Linux, you have to figure out what the IP address actually is. Okay. And that could be an issue. So let me try to go in and this is one reason to use Wireshark. Let me just look for it here. See? There it is. See that little search box? Ubuntu, you're not the first to have a search box, but I find this much more useful. So here is Wireshark. I'm not root, so I may actually want to run this from the command line. It's useless in user space. So alright, so logged in, Wireshark. Nope. Let's go to capture interfaces and just say the one that looks like it's got packets coming through. We start it up, have a look, and you're basically just looking for anything that says it's a Western Digital. Of course, if you have Dropbox and other things running, that could, but you can just look for Western. Can you? Nope. Let's see. What am I looking for? I know what the answer is, but I just want to see if it's going to be able to come up this way. I probably should have had that ready already, but too much. Okay, there we can stop. So what you're going to be looking for is SSDP packets that are aimed for 239 whatever. It's got a notify HTTP 1.1, and it's got, then that's what it is. This, in fact, I'll sort it by SSDP. So um, they're probably one of them. And then to find out if it is, you just go into your web browser and put the IP number where you would normally put the address, and you'll find it. Okay. If it ships outside your subnet, well, you're probably out of luck, but I think it'll still come up on the packet sniffs. I'm not sure. Or you can just look at the documentation that comes with your Western Digital hard disk, and they may actually have better information for you. This is stuff that I'm going to tell you that's not in the documentation, that I haven't seen discussed elsewhere. Okay, so how did I get this Western Digital MyCloud program to install? Well, I use Crossover Office, that's for sure. And the one thing that I had to have installed was .NET 4. It might have been 2.0, might have been good enough, but I didn't try to install it until I got .NET 4.0 installed. So in Crossover, install software, and then what it is a runtime component down here. And a lot of time, you're going to need runtime components to get things to work. So just .NET, there's 4.0, you pick it, create your new bottle, and then go to the Western Digital site and download the program for Windows and install it that way. It'll work. The only side effect that I've noticed with this program is the first time you log in, you may get 20 different warnings about server certificates that are coming out of this Western Digital as to whether you want to accept them or not. Just go ahead and click yes like 20 times, and then it works like normal. And so it's good to know, because basically, if I was just going to use this just as a Linux user without Windows, I wouldn't have the ability to run this Western Digital MyCloud program or access any of my data remotely except through my cell phone. And of course, cell phones sometimes do have a lot of capacity, but whether you can actually use the things that you get off you can't always exactly get that stuff off of your cell phone onto someone else's desk. It'd be a lot easier just to, right now my mom's using Linux, so it was very good to be able to download the Western Digital software and actually install it. How much? Okay. So that's that. All right, so now let's talk about mounting the Samba share. Basically, these are just Samba servers. If you don't know much about Linux and you're just starting, basically these are little Windows servers. You can, and I'm not talking about anything advanced. I don't know. It may have advanced capabilities. I just don't know. One thing I do know is it does have the ability to require that from Windows to access the contents of this Western Digital hard drive, that you have to actually supply your username and password at least once. You just mount this drive just like you would mount any other network drive. So let me show you how that's basically done in Windows. It's pretty much, and then I'll discuss how I got it done. The results to be equivalent in Linux, and also how I integrated that with my existing Wine installations as well, which is something I've never really gone over. None of this I've ever really gone over. Okay, so here is this Z drive. I'll disconnect from it, which basically means I'm unmapping it, and if I were to reboot, it wouldn't be there. So I no longer have a Z drive. It's gone. To find this, you could right-click on Network. And of course, when Windows 8 arrives to you the first time, it doesn't have these icons. You have to right click on the desktop, select personalize, and change the desktop icons and check these suckers off. Let's see how things are going over here. Yes, okay. So now you have a network icon. Whoopee! So now you just right click on it and you select Map Network Drive. Now, you may be under one or two circumstances. You may be under one circumstance where things are set up in such a way that you just click the browse button and everything magically appears. And you go down and you click on the My Cloud, and then it has what are called shares. These are all shares. Select one of the shares, or the share that you're interested in using. I'm interested in using the public share, and that's a misleading name because it isn't available to the public. And I click OK, and I have reconnected login there, and click Finish. Now, the first time it tries to connect, if it requires a password, it'll ask you for a username and password, and there'll be another checkoff box as to whether you want to keep the password stored in Windows or not. Okay, you just click Finish. And so now every time you reboot into your computer, you have a Map Network Drive. That's how it works. Obviously, you can tell I don't require a password in this circumstance, so we just use it. So there it is. I just map it. So you can have pretty much any security model that you want with these little things. It's got its own processor, just like a computer. It's got its own network card, just like a computer. The only thing it doesn't have, just like a computer, is a keyboard, a mouse, and a monitor. At least that's not the way it arrives. There's a whole other subject to talk about that I'm not well versed in at all, and I don't know if I'll ever spend the time doing, but you can actually modify these things. It basically has a Debian distribution on the inside, and it's running Samba. An earlier version of Samba. Let's see if I know exactly which version that is on mine. It doesn't matter. I think it's version 3.5. It isn't Samba 4 yet, so that's it for that. Okay, so it's not really all that important. Okay. The next thing is Linux. And for a new user, it's probably going to be to look around for the answer as to how do you mount a Samba. First, you don't know what a freaking Samba is. And, you go into the Linux world and you want to mount this Western Digital, you're not going to get a lot of answers. There is some discussion about it over at the Western Digital forums. Excuse me, sorry, got asthma. But they just say you should mount it just like you would any other Samba share. Western Digital doesn't give you software that will open up and act like a graphical user interface and give you a picture of the Western Digital, and you can't just right click on something and map it. It doesn't just show up in your, well, it could actually. Let me show you how it could show up, but you can't do anything with it. So in KDE 3 and in KDE 4, and this is why, the main reason why I use Conqueror, amongst other things, as my default browser. And what I'm saying may not be true, but I like the layout of it, so I'll just stick with that. Let's see if I could. Sorry about the delay here, but I'm going to put Conqueror on the desktop. So, okay, here's Conqueror. And let's see if it opens the way. No, it didn't open the way I thought it would. There are a few. Excuse this for a second. Let's see if that works. Conqueror has a layout, and I could probably have to drag this. Yeah, let me just do it this way. Well, I'm going too much detail. Let's back up. Basically, Conqueror can act like both a web browser and a file browser, but I don't find it as to be a very useful web browser. But I find it to be a more useful file browser than Dolphin. Okay. Sorry, Dolphin guys, but that's just the way I feel about it. So, what you can do is I've made a little icon called Network. I've basically right-clicked, created a new folder. Or did I? Let's see what I did. I don't even remember. Oh, sorry. I right-clicked, and I created a new link to a location. And the location that I have is just that, SMB:// What happens when I click on it? It scans the network for all the network shares. And our work group happens to be called MDK Group, because the first successful Samba share I ever had was using Mandrake Linux, and I called customer support and asked them to help me get the thing worked up, the thing up and running. And so the customer support person that was on the phone with me suggested that I change the work group to MDK Group. Anyway, it's a dumb story, but that's what it was. Let's get back to this. So you could browse the network. So you go in here. These are all my Samba shares. We've got a lot of machines that have Samba running in the background. Most of them are not really accessible, but there they are. You can't really right-click on this Western Digital My Cloud and say Map Network Drive. It doesn't work that way. In fact, there are two separate things that are going on here. Yes, I can click on the My Cloud, and eventually it'll be populated with the 3 shares that are available. And then I can dig in to the share, and I'll see all the contents that I would. It's the same thing as just going into My Cloud. But you notice that says Home Jack Samba My Cloud. Well, I happen to set up all my computers the same way at work, at home, so the most convenient name to use is Jack, because that's the name of the owner of the place that I work. So I use Jack. That way I could take a script I make here and bring it home, or make it home and bring here, and everything works. But you notice, here's the contents of my Western Digital, but it's in a directory on my hard drive. Did I make a copy of everything on the Western Digital? No. Instead, that's called a mount point. So what that basically means is when you see the term mount point, that basically means what folder on your computer do you want the contents of some hard drive or some network share to appear in. In this case, I've decided that my mount point was going to be Home Jack Samba My Cloud for this particular share. If I go up, there's another mount point called Archive. And then there's a third mount point called Dell. Now, to create these things, I'll let you know how to mount these things, but we'll get there. That's the icing on the cake. To mount these, you have to understand this stuff first. Otherwise, the way I did it won't make any sense. So, to make these things, these are also links to URLs. But okay, so I go to properties. Here's the URL. Is basically, it's not SMB:// because that, if I did that, that would browse the network. This is actually pointing to an actual directory on my hard drive. And in this case, you actually have to type it in. If you try to browse to it, it doesn't work well. But if you actually type in the full URL, or actually just copy it. So I did that, highlighted it, I right-clicked, selected copy. That's another reason why I like KDE. Go over here, highlight it, Control V, that works for me, / done. Okay, click on it. There it is. So you can also, in Concrete, you can also make a link to your mount points or other parts of your computer. But sometimes it makes more sense to use a hard disk icon, but I'm off topic. But basically all that is just create a new link to device, hard disk device, go to device, you pick what's available. If nothing's available, you can't do that. If there's something available, you can. But at least your root directory, which is this one over here, the only thing that really matters is that, like the /Windows, /virtual machine, /that. Don't do it to your swap. There's no sense in doing that. And then you say, okay. You can only do that for things you have permissions to actually use. And permissions is a whole different subject. But we're going to touch on permissions when I go into the details of how I got this to mount without having to type in my password all the time. Okay, now after I do this presentation, I'll probably change my password. But the only way that this will actually make sense is to show you everything, because context is everything in Unix, and a lot of the time the documentation has no context. And most of the help you get out there are just people listening to your context and then regurgitating back some command that they know works in a certain context out of experience. But if you ask them to read the man pages, they probably couldn't do it themselves, even the ones that tell you to do that. But not important. Okay, so in KDE and KDE4, and this is probably true for GNOME, I just don't know how it works, basically, is there's a place that you can put executable files inside your home directory so that when you log in, those files will execute as soon as you come in, so long as they're marked executable. There's something called shell scripting in Linux, where you can take what you would have had to type at the command prompt and instead put it in a text file, save it, name it, put it in a place you know will execute every time you log in to where you're going to go, and that way you don't have to keep typing the same thing over and over again. There's also a way that I just found out about that you can actually avoid supplying a password when you use sudo. So if you get tired of having to use sudo repetitively when you're Linux and think it's some kind of penance that you have to pay just to not to use Windows, you can actually free yourself of that if you make these shell scripts with the password available and able to be passed on to sudo in the shell script. Now, where is this location? For KDE 3, and this would also be true for Ubuntu's Trinity, because I know they use KDE 4 has decided they're always going to use KDE 4 to indicate what's theirs. KDE is just KDE 3. Okay, so in your home folder, first of all, there's something called hidden files. What? I thought this was free software. No. Basically, hidden files are hidden so they just won't clutter your stuff up. They're basically files you're probably not going to really go into much at all. You may have to access once in a while. And that includes the .kde folder. There's the .kde folder. That's the .kde4 folder. Now the icons I'm using here are the crystal icons. They come with SUSE. If you use Ubuntu, you actually have to download them from Everato's website, and Everado has stopped. I think he's actually stopped making them available. So I've even at times I've had to go get old font sets. Anyway, whatever. I'm off topic once again. So here is KD folder, and then inside this, there's an AutoStart folder. I've never used the the share folder is misleading. It doesn't mean if you put something in there that other people on the network will be able to access it. That's a whole different topic. But the AutoStart folder is what it sounds like. So in here, I've got an application that I've installed with Crossover Office. I have a virtual machine, a link to a virtual machine for Windows 8. Oh, here's my little calendar down here. Yip-de-doo, it's Lotus Organizer. And that program was made back in, 96 or 97, something like that. We haven't had to buy a calendar since, but of course we could decide to use Google Calendar, which would be a good choice, but we haven't, so still have that there. Okay, so these little things here are the shell scripts. I have the Mount Dell is the server. Mount Western Digital MyCloud is the Western Digital MyCloud. Mount Western Digital is the MyBook over there. Okay, so what are the contents? What's the secret sauce, James? Well, there's not much to it. So basically, when you make a shell script, all you gotta do is remember that you have to put some weird stuff at the top. You don't really have to know what that means. It is a pound, an exclamation point, a forward slash, a bin, and then an SH. Leave yourself some space. Type into here whatever commands you would have used, and then you save it. If you put a .sh next to it, it'll give you a nice shiny black icon over there. Then you right click on it, select properties, go to permissions, mark it executable. Okay, so now let's look at the contents of what this does. First of all, what's this Echo 1 Linux 1, and what's this thing sticking up here? That thing sticking up right there is the pipe. That's right, can't even see my own camera. Right there, below the backspace. Shift, that thing. That's the pipe. So what this does is redirect the output from the command called echo. Let's see what echo does. I say echo hello. What does it say? It says hello. So what do you think that does? Echo 1 Linux 1. That echoes back the password. So that is the root password. So I'm going to pipe that to sudo with the /s. I don't know what the /s means, but I know it works. I probably could look it up, but I'm too lazy to. Then I have a space, and I have the command mount. So basically, at this point, I have, after the password is supplied to sudo, I'm root. I'm the administrator. And for some crazy reason, I haven't come across a Linux distribution that won't simply let you mount a Samba share that is absolutely not secured and be very useful for any end user to use from user space without being root. And I think that's crazy. That's as crazy as having to be the root user to change the volume or something like that. But anyway, that's the way it is. So I don't want to have to type sudo and all this crap and then have to supply the password manually every time I log in just to get to a share. Instead, I want it to just be there. So my reboot, there it is. So I supply the password, use the sudo command, then I do mount -t CIFS -o space, then I got SEC equals none and a comma. Then I use the user ID is basically my username. UID equals my name, space, 2 forward slashes, then the IP address of the device I want to mount, which you got from the web browser. And then the folder that you create inside your home directory that is the location that you want your stuff to appear from the share that you've made available, you've decided to put your stuff in. It doesn't have to be the same name. Be any name you want to pick. I happen to pick archive. I could have picked my book. We made a directory called my book in the home directory. Again, that's right over here. So, well, actually, wait, I'm confusing things. This here is the name of the share. Sorry. So remember we were in Windows. We were here. I don't know if I should do it that way. When we browse the network, I'll do it this way. When we browse the network, again, what I did to create this little thing, I right-clicked, create a new link to the location, put in SMB : / up here. I just type in a description for the icon. I called it network neighborhood, for example. I say okay. Initially, oh wow, it happened to actually pick that icon for me. Then I can click on it. It'll scan the network and okay, there's the work group. There's the my cloud. Sorry. There's the my book. And the my book has more than one share available. This happens to be the archive share. Also, if I put in, just to prove a point, if I put in this IP number in archive, I get the contents of what's in the archive share on that thing. So that's the only confusing thing. If you've got something that's named archive, you may, when I was a beginner, I always decided to use the same name. So if my mount point would have been, when I was a beginner, I would have made a folder called archive, and I would have put it in the root of the entire system. But then I would have had mess with the permissions. I mean, even your own home directory, you're in good shape. So if you want to, you can make a directory called archive in your home directory. If they both have the same name, you just got to pick one. You just got to remember, just got to remember which one associates with which one the first time, and then you set up your icons in a way that makes sense to you. It's not going to assign it drive letters. You can assign these. I could have called this Z : /. There's the Z drive, right? But instead, I decided to call it archive. That's just, I don't know. I'm more used to it. I'm not as Windows-centric as I used to be. Okay, so after you have, so you echo, space, root password, space, pipe it, space, sudo, minus capital S, space, mount -T, sifs. And what this means, you're saying you want to mount a file system. This is a network file system. The type is the Common Internet File System, but that's the name of CIFS or Common Internet File System Linux understands. I don't know what -O means, but it might be options. And I don't know why they go in this order, but you got to keep them in this order, I believe. SEC equals none, comma, UID equals jack. Now, what is this UID stuff? Well, I'll show you. Basically, when I go into here, and this is an important thing that I should mention. The first time, I've never mounted my Samba shares this way. I used to always do it in the initd. I would make a script and put it in etc initd, which if you're a beginner, don't worry about the details. If you're intermediate, you'll understand what I'm talking about. And I would do this whole command thing, and then I would put an F mask and a D mask, because if I didn't, root would be the owner. And actually, in this case, when I'm using sudo to mount the share, root becomes the owner. Now, in a technical sense, the ownership that takes place actually on this machine over here, the files are owned by a user named nobody in a group called no group. But when the files are sent over there, Samba takes care of the permission changes once the files arrive over there. But over here, the way the files are represented to me, there are permissions associated with that and ownership for some kind of user, either me or root, basically, unless there are other users. But if it's a personal computer, most of the time it's just you, right? Well, if you mount it and root owns the files as they are represented to you on your machine, then you can't change them because you don't have permissions. So the reason why you want to have the user mask is you're saying make the ownership of these files be represented as me, not root. Now, I probably should have used GID equals users. Okay. Unless you have decided, as for your own reasons, your own purposes, to make yourself a member of the root group. Let's see if I've done that actually. I don't remember. I think I might have. I might not have. So let me speak up from facts and not speculation. How about that? Just because I'm a member of the root group doesn't mean I have root privileges. Let's see. Yes, I am a member of the root group. So when I look at I don't need to worry about the group ID, but you might want to. So on your script, add after comma UID equals your username, put a comma. Put GID equals users, probably. Your system probably uses the users group as your group. Okay, but when I look at inside here, another very nice thing that KDE has that GNOME doesn't, and KDE 4 doesn't do very well, is that you can actually see all the permissions, who the owner is, what the group is. Am I even getting that? Let's get this out of the way. Permissions, owner, group. Now see how everything says Jack and the group is root. I have no problems that the group is root because I am part of the root group. But just to show you how this works, I will actually break my vow of laziness and I will become the root user by using another means to become root, which is using SU, which is switch user. And I will unmount the share. This is the mount point, and I'm going to unmount the myCloud, and I'll show you something else that's interesting that happens when that takes place. Okay, so now the myCloud is no longer available to me inside my home directory. I can still browse the network, but it's not mounted. And it is important to actually mount the directory and have read and write privileges inside that directory if you're going to integrate your Wine apps to be able to get to files that are shared on the network. And I'll show you that. So let's go up here. Go into Home and Jack and back into Samba, actually. And the myCloud directory is empty. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to modify this script right here. This is myCloud. I'm going to make I'm also going to make the share have the group ID equals users. Did I get that? Okay, so this is just text, but I could actually run this. So how do you run this stuff? Besides just putting it in the KDE directory, because you may want to be able to run a shell script without logging in and out. So here is, I'm going to do mount, and I just type period / start to spell Mount Western Digital MyCloud. I hit the tab key because I'm lazy. It gives me both options. So I guess I have to Mount Western Digital James. Oh, because you know why? I didn't change directories into the KDE directory, and I have another copy of the script inside my home directory. So let's change directories to .kde / type the A, hit tab. Ah, it typed auto start for me. I'm in there now. Now I'm going to run this ./MOU, hit the tab. And notice how, since I have two things in there of comment, it only auto-completes to mount. Fortunately, I have to type Western Digital, but it'll do that for me. / and then my cloud sh. Enter. What? It's still empty. Or is it? Ah, everything's there. So this is the refresh key. Then I do that, and guess what? The owner of these files is both me and my own group. So since I'm the owner, I have the first set of permissions. I have read, write, and execute permissions. Whereas members of the group has write and execute, and everybody else has write and execute permissions. So now I'm the complete owner of these files. It probably is better that I have the group ID on my shell script. So I'm going to do this for all three of them. I'm going to make a copy and put the other copy in the KDE4 directory in case I decide to log in and use KDE4 for whatever reason that may be. Got the user ID and the GID. I'm going to copy these. Overwrote them all. So now when I log out and log back in, which I can't do because that would stop the recording, I'll find that all three of the shares will be mounted in my home directory and I can write to them. Okay, so that's good and everything. Now, in Wine, you actually have to give your network shares drive letters. You can't just have a mount point. So let's go into Crossover Office. Well, first of all, let's do this. Okay, let's work backwards. So let's say I know that it's the best thing for me to do would be to save my Word documents in a certain folder on the network. So the end result that I want, so I start Office 2007, go to Word Options, and I think it's okay, so we have the default file location. Crossover Office does have this annoying habit of creating drives that I've not created, such as FG and I, but I'm going to pick the Y drive. It also doesn't do a very good job of displaying the actual mount point. But if I decided that I want to keep my documents under the audit directory, under Y, I just say OK. So it's going to go to Y audit. Test. Save. Oh, sorry, gotta restart. Why are you doing that? Did I pick the wrong feature? What's going on here? Word options. Save. What do we... Did I not say okay? Why audit? The directory is not valid. Oh, because case matters. Case matters in Linux. So if I just make it small, not going to work. Now, if that doesn't stick, then I got a real question. There it goes. So it goes to the, there it is. It should be, let me make sure I got this thing. Went to the audit directory. So let me go over, make sure I actually got that. I went over to this, went to word options, clicked on the save, browsed, it went to my computer, and then I selected audit. Okay, cancel, done. So if I want that kind of integration, okay, and then of course just to prove that that thing actually exists, I went to my home directory, went to my mount point, Y is Dell in this case, and I go over to audit. There's the audit directory. So I can get reasonable integration with my wine apps. Now, if my mom's able to figure out how to install Office 2007, and she actually did, using Crossover Office, I expect you would too, but I'll just go over some basic things. But the first thing I'm going to go over is how did I assign drives to, they're like mount points. They work exactly like mount points. How did I actually assign those drives to particular mount points? Okay, so go into Crossover Office, Tools, Manage Bottles. Here's another tip. I know they advertise these bottles as being a way to install an app and install a second app without ruining your first set of installations, but it really doesn't work that way. You don't want to waste a lot of disk space. Well, you probably have plenty if you have a new computer. Or time installing the same runtime components. There are a lot of programs actually need Internet Explorer, or a lot of programs actually need .NET, so you don't want to install that twice, because each one of these bottles are basically fake Windows installations. If you put them all in the same place, then if one program happens to bring with it a few runtime components along with it, you may actually succeed in installing another program that you wouldn't have had success with before, because it needs that same runtime component, but it doesn't, the CD or whatever medium you got the program in doesn't ship with it. Okay, but let's get back to mapping. So, you know, control panel, there's something called wine configuration. Launch that. Go over to drives. You can just add a drive. Select a letter, you know, say D or whatever. And then over here where it's got browse, you just browse to whatever part of the files, the Linux file system you want to use as being that hard drive. Now keep in mind that you can also remove it too. I'm going to remove this one. Keep in mind you're only going to have permissions to change files and folders that are in your home directory in general, or that you've managed to write somewhere that you have permissions to write in. Once you set all your mount points, then these other programs will see the Y drive as home, Jack, Samba, Dell. whatever you decide to use it with. So that's basically my whole integration story. Crossover Office helps everybody, or a beginning user, and even advanced users, use some certain programs in Wine that you may or may not have different degrees of success using the Wine that comes installed with your distribution, and you might as well just use it. I mean, it costs like $50 a year. Now, Wine isn't the answer to everything. There are a lot of programs that are made by Windows that just simply won't run in it. They're mostly new programs, so the reason why Office 2007 runs okay is because, well, that's program's 5 years old. I have a video about Wine, so that's, if you want to learn more about my thoughts and ideas about Wine, you could look at that. But that's it. So that's basically how to use a Western Digital MyBook. Also, one thing I didn't mention is that command syntax that I use for mounting the Western Digital MyBook shares is not unique to just Western Digital MyBook shares. If you have at home a computer with Windows on it and you want to share some files on your Windows computer with another computer that's also on the same network, and or you want to share files between both of them, you buy one of these $200 or some odd Western Digitals, and also incorporate it on the network. You would use in one of, say, the other computers, a Linux computer, you could use that same set of commands not only to mount the Western Digital, but also to mount the Windows share on the machine. Now, there is a difference. I have another sample script that I should show. So there's a little bit of thing you have to add if there's actually a username and password involved to accessing the share. So let's go back to this. All right, so if you want to do it the traditional way, put it this way, there's almost no point in going into the command line, and this basically is represent what would be done in the command line. So this is the command line. I clicked on that little console icon over there. If I type the exact same thing that appears in this text file into here, I'd get the same result. But the only reason why I'm echoing the password back to sudo is because I don't want to have to be present every time I log into KDE to supply the password 3 times for nothing. At least in my judgment, in my circumstances, it's for nothing. I have nothing to worry about. Whether that share gets mounted or not makes no difference. But the normal way to do it, most everywhere you're going to look, you're going to find the answer saying start out with sudo from here on forward. But they're not going to tell you the particulars of the user ID because they can't guess what your local username is. They're not going to be able to guess what the IP number is of the Western Digital or the other machine that you want to mount into. Now, you don't necessarily have to have the IP number in there. Sometimes you can have the name of the computer. And in this case, the name of my computer is Linux/29VC. The computer names can get more difficult to remember than simply putting the IP number in there, but you can use the computer name. They tell you to make a directory, and they may not even tell you to put it in your home directory. Then they may tell you to change permissions on it, this whole complicated thing. this whole recipe you'd have to go through. This avoids that. So in your case, what you want to, if you're going to follow my example exactly, you got to go in your home directory, create a Samba folder, and then create a My Cloud folder inside of that. You probably can't use the name Jack unless your name happens to be Jack. Okay. Or you happen to want to use Jack. That's nothing wrong with that. And then you just use the syntax. So this is what you would normally, even if you have just a Samba server, like I do underneath the desk, underneath the ancient Dell monitor. This is the way you would mount your Samba share. There's literally like a 50-page thread that went on at the Ubuntu forums for people trying to figure out how to mount a Samba share from Linux after they changed over the syntax from SMBFS to CIFS. It was a little bit different. Anyway, if you're root, then all you gotta type is, if you're the root user, all you gotta type is mount -t CIFS and the rest of this stuff. But again, there's gonna be some things that are gonna be unique to your situation. If you decide to call the directory I've called my cloud something else, well, you've got to use your directory name, not mine. And the same thing for a Windows share. If you go into Windows, you share a file and print sharing, and you decide to share your music directory on your computer, if you're at a Linux desk, you'd want to get the name, the IP number of that Windows computer on the local network and the name of the share. And then, and then if there's a username or password, this is probably why I kept the other one. This is what you do. So after the O, before the, you wouldn't have the SEC equals none. Okay. Instead, what you would have is username equals, and if you're trying to connect to a Windows machine where the name is Joe, username equals Joe. You would get rid of this SEC equals none. Put a comma. Password equals I won't tell you. Then you have a comma after that. Then you get your user ID, your group ID, and the rest the same. So if you have a username and password, that's what you do to add that there. Now there is a way to add this to file system tab, but I'll tell you why I don't do that. Okay, so something, ever since System D arrived, well, I'll give you a specific example. And it probably applies to a network share. And this is not true of Windows. So sometimes people decide to turn off their appliances, including Western Digital MyClouds. And if you do, if you I'm getting old. I just forgot what I was going to say. Oh, right. Oh, yeah. System D. Sorry. It's kind of complicated. So you can, if you want, I'm just going to describe an experience that I've had that I say is a showstopper for Linux use on the desktop. You can, a possible showstopper, or in server space. you can take one of these USB sticks. You know what I'm talking about, like, this thing right here. And you can edit your file system's tab file, and you can add the USB stick as a device and create a mount point and give permissions. So what file systems tab, there's a file called etc file systems tab. It's one of the basic things, it used to be one of the basic things to know when you're using Linux, but not so much anymore, because auto mount works now. But before, you'd have to go into File Systems tab and create a mount point. What used to happen if the device just wasn't there, but there was an entry in File Systems tab, it would just spit one line out in your log file and say, hey, a hard disk is gone. Okay, not anymore after System D came in. If you boot your system up, and one of the devices that's listed in etc fs tab, and I'll just show you that right now, is not connected, you will go into emergency mode immediately. And it's not as user friendly as it used to be. These things are basically a unique identifier for the disk that the system creates for you when you install, so you don't need to worry about any of that stuff. But you could, if you wanted to, create an entry in File Systems tab. When you go around, you'll see a lot of people making suggestions to make an entry in File Systems tab. Well, the problem is if your Western Digital is off and you reboot, and the system can't mount your Samba share because you've turned the Western Digital off or the cable got disconnected, it'll go straight into emergency mode. And it'll give you something, type system control, journal control, this and that, to find out what happened. And basically you'll look and it'll say, oh, yeah, my Samba share didn't mount. So you won't be able to use the system. You won't have a graphical user interface until you go back, reconnect the Western Digital to the network, and then reboot completely. And that's a pain in the ass, and I don't really want to fuck with that. But I don't see why I should have to. So basically the way System D behaves and the way it reacts to devices that are missing but are listed in File Systems tab has turned it into a real pain in the ass. So just don't add it to File Systems tab unless you know for damn sure that your thing's never going to run out of power while this thing stays up and running and you want to reboot. It's not really a problem if you already booted in, but if you try to get back into your system, the File Systems tab, and it's kind of archaic as you can see. It's not really the most user-friendly way. I have a clean, easy way for you to get in. So all you got to do is create a text file using kwrite, which is over here. Utilities, editor, kwrite. In fact, okay, now let me explain how I get all these icons on my desktop. You just right-click, add item to desktop. There it is. Since I don't need it, I'm putting it back in the trash. Bye-bye. Okay, so it's gone. So, to review. Create a text file, put it in .kde. You have to know the administrative password for your system. I'm assuming that this is just a personal computer, so you're probably wondering why you're having to type in passwords all the time. And no, it's not to remind yourself to be a good network internet citizen. It's because the system was originally designed to be a multi-user system. And people just can't seem to get their minds off of that idea. So why inconvenience yourself? Don't do it. If you want to inconvenience yourself, you can put the scripts in auto start. I can't even guarantee that they will run. And I can't even guarantee if it will ask you for a password once you log in. So you won't get a mounted share. So you got to do this. Otherwise, you got to find another way to do it. If you try to put your this command into etc initd, you better make sure you have it in LSB formatting standards, or it just won't be able to run for whatever reason. If you decide to put it in etc file systems tab, you better figure out how the file systems tab thing works and make sure that your thing isn't off when you reboot, or get ready to reboot again until you have the thing plugged in. And if you sold it and it's no longer working and you try to boot in, you can't get in, you better learn how to use nano from the command line to edit your file systems tab file, otherwise you're locked out. Okay, so here is when you just create your text file, type in your archaic Unix command into the text file, save it, right click on the put an sh on the end of it, so I don't know, just so you build it's like any other, like .doc is a Word file. This is a shell script file. Right click on it, go to permissions, select executable. Now if your screen doesn't look like my screen, that's because you made the horrible mistake of following the distribution's suggestion that you use KDE4. This is OpenSUSE. This is OpenSUSE 13.1. I've been rolling with KDE3 probably since OpenSUSE 8. That's not a big deal. What you want to do is you want to search the net for OpenSUSE repositories. In fact, OpenSUSE KDE3 repository. What you want to do is you want to add that repository to Yast. Yast is the... I wonder why it didn't ask me for the password there, because I'm not root right now. You clicked on that thing, and then all you have to do to add a repository is stick with specify URL. They may give you a web page. They may actually give you an 8. Don't use it. They give you an 8. Don't use it. Specify URL. Don't use that option. Paste in the HTTP into here and name it something that means something to you. Like, this is where I get KDE from. So let me show you actually what it looks like for my KDE3 thing. And I don't have it. Of course I have it. Where is it? There it is. Good enough. Okay, so widen this. So it's just a URL. It's HTTP. Download OpenSUSE.org. And I just basically copied and pasted that off the web page, said okay, and then under software management, what you want to do is after it takes half a minute to load all the security keys I can care less about. God, it's taking a long. I got a lot of repositories. It's taking a long time. All you have to do is go to I don't even remember. Package, no, is it? Package groups, is it? No. RPM groups? No. Package groups? No. Patterns? Yes, patterns. That's what it is. See, it's confusing. I don't even remember. So all you got to do is an overstatement. Basically, view by patterns, which doesn't make sense to anybody except for people that made this. And you're going to look for KDE3. That's only after you added the repository. And if you can't find it, there it is, KDE3 desktop environment. Check that off. It checks a lot of the stuff off for you. Then you can add other stuff. Then you accept and it downloads everything for you and installs it. Hopefully you're not on dial-up. Because they don't sell CDs anymore. It's unfortunate. Okay. So so now how do I get this wonderful OpenSUSE distribution onto my computer? And how did I pull it up? How did I exercise Windows 8 from my computer and allow Linux the honor of being the base operating system and putting Windows 8 inside a little box where it belongs. How did I accomplish this? Well, I'll do that next.